Chapter 1 Your Awesome Power to Change. This is going to be an incredible book for some of you. Why didn't I say all of you? Because I want to stress the vital importance of making a decision to change your life. You decide if it's going to be you. Changing your paradigm takes a committed decision because it goes in the opposite direction of nearly everything you've been taught. We go to school, take a book, read it, ask questions on the material, and then go on to another book. The truth is, we can't possibly understand the contents of the book this way. Reading something once and moving on is not going to do it. Our paradigm was built through repetition, constant, spaced repetition, and that's the way it's going to be changed. But this makes little sense to most people. They're relating to the way they have been and the way they were educated in the past, when they weren't really being educated at all. They were merely gathering information. You'll see people with very impressive degrees from prestigious universities who are struggling through their life. They don't have enough money. They don't hold down a good position. If they have their own company, they go bankrupt or out of business. You think, they're so smart. How could this possibly happen? The truth is, they're not very smart at all. They've gathered a lot of information, but they don't use it. Their behavior is controlled by their paradigms, not by the information they've got. They're not doing what they know how to do. For some strange reason, they never figure it out. They never stop and analyze their own behavior in relation to what they know. Over the years, I have found that most people who are highly successful and I have found that most people who are highly successful have unconscious competence. They cannot articulate why they're doing so well. They may be multimillionaires and they may have built prestigious organizations, but they cannot transfer this knowledge to their children because they don't know why they're doing it. They'll say, well, I just do it. People think these individuals are pretty smart, but it's got nothing to do with being smart. It has to do with their paradigm, because the paradigm controls us to an enormous degree. Success in an undertaking totally depends on what's going on inside of our minds. It's got nothing to do with what's going on outside. Some people do extremely well even in the face of bad economic conditions. Even during the Great Depression, not everyone was out of work. Not everyone was broke. Some people did very well, earning millions of dollars. Why did they do very well? What was going on? Why did a few people win? They built their success in their minds. It has to come from the inside out, not from the outside in. We're being controlled by our outside world because we've been trained that way. We've been programmed to let the outside world control us. Paradigms and habits. As I've said, just thinking positively isn't going to do it. That's an illusion. It takes a change in paradigm, and a paradigm is a multitude of ideas that are fixed in our subconscious minds. Ideas that are fixed in our subconscious mind are known as habits. A paradigm is a multitude of habits that are fixed in our subconscious mind. A habit is an idea that expresses itself without any conscious thought. You just thought automatically move. You drive your car primarily by habit. You don't have to think to do it because you've been programmed. If you objectively observe your own behavior for 2 or 3 hours from the time you get up in the morning, you'll see that most of your behavioral patterns are not going to give you the success you desire. Then you have to ask yourself, why am I acting this way? Every day you do the same things because you're programmed to do them. We're programmed to live the way we're living. First of all, we're programmed genetically. That's why we look like our relatives. It's built right into our genes at birth. Each of us is the confluence of a genetic pool that goes back for many generations. It controls us. It controls everything we're doing. A person's paradigm has nothing to do with what they learned in school. If a person has a bad paradigm, they're going to lose, even if they have a great education. Their education is not going to help them. First of all, we have to understand how the paradigm is formed. Then we have to understand how it's changed. And that is something most people do not understand. It's not taught in school. There are very few seminars that teach it. When I came across this idea, I was shocked because even though I was working in this field, I didn't really understand this principle. Unconscious competence. Way back in 1961, I was earning $4,000 a year. I owed $6,000, and I couldn't see how I was ever going to get out of it. 5 years later, I was earning over $1 million, and I owned a company with branches in Toronto, Montreal, Boston, Cleveland, Atlanta, and London. I was being very irresponsible. I was living in London. I had moved over there and started a company. I'd go to the Playboy Club and play roulette. I didn't care if I lost the money because I knew where the money was and how to get it. One day I stopped and asked, how did this happen? Why did my life change so dramatically? I couldn't answer this question. I didn't know why. I had been raised to believe that if you're going to earn a lot of money, you've got to be really smart. I knew I wasn't very smart, but I was earning a lot of money. Then I'd also been raised to believe that if you don't go to school, you'll never get a good job. I hadn't done this. I went to high school for 2 months. I didn't have a good job. I owned the whole company. That's when I started to check almost everything I was raised to believe, and I found that most of it wasn't true. Can one person be better than someone else? No. No one is any better than anybody else. Their results may be a little better. They may earn more. They may be more productive. They may be able to run faster, but we're all exactly the same. If you took us all and put us into a fire, we're all going to be reduced to the same level. We're mass, energy, and vibration. Color, size, gender don't mean anything. We are all the same. We've got to realize we are all subject to laws that are exact. They don't change. They weren't made by men, so men are not going to change them. Our success is going to depend on our understanding and our ability to bring our lives into harmony with these laws. One day, I had a euphoric experience, and everything in my head started to shift. I didn't know why I was acting as I was. I didn't know why I was winning. I had no formal education, no business experience. I thought, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to find out why I became successful. It took me 9.5 years of conscious and deliberate focus to figure out the answer. When I did, all I wanted to do was work at it. I was in building maintenance. I started cleaning one office, and I ended up cleaning a lot of offices in a number of different cities. I left that and went to work at the Nightingale Conant Corporation. I went from earning over $1 million a year to $18,000 a year. 5 years later, I was earning $33,000. I was prepared to pay them to let me work there because of the material they had. I thought Earl Nightingale and Lloyd Conant were absolute geniuses. What they were doing blew my mind. I didn't know anybody else that was doing what they were doing. I wanted to learn, and I did. I studied them like a scientist. That's when I started to connect the dots. I was born during the Depression, and when I was only 6 years old, the whole world went to war. Everything was rationed. I lived through some interesting times when there was nothing but bad news. Nobody was interested in developing a child's mind. My mother was raising 3, so getting by was the main deal. In 1961, I started listening to Earl Nightingale's recordings on my little battery-operated recorder player, and I couldn't stop. I had never heard anybody talk like Earl Nightingale. I used to think that if God had a voice, it would be like his. Since then, I've become locked into this material. I've never stopped studying it from 1961 till today. Developing awareness. This material should be taught in schools, and even before that, you can actually teach it to a baby. We have, as a people, become obsessed with the development of the intellect, and we ignore the development of awareness. A person can have a doctorate in 2 or 3 subjects and yet be unaware of how to earn money, how to build a business, or how to develop personally. Awareness is key. We want to become aware, I believe, of our oneness with God, with infinite intelligence. The more aware we become, the more it's reflected in our results. A lack of awareness is also reflected in our results. One of Earl's most famous programs was The Strangest Secret, in which he said that you become what you think about. The more you look into that idea, the more profound it becomes. I've taken this a bit further by adding that we put the brakes on ourselves through how we choose our thoughts. We have to start by understanding that there's only one part of the universe that we can change, and that is ourselves. We can change nothing else. We can't change the conditions or circumstances around us. We have to adapt to what's going on and keep going, but we also have to understand that we're bigger than the external situations that we're facing. I really don't give those things a lot of time because they pass and something else will come. There's always something outside that will control us if we let it. I don't choose to let it. I'm in control of me. Furthermore, it's not just what we think, it's what we internalize, because you think something without internalizing it. You've got to internalize these thoughts. You've got to emotionalize them, or they're not going to do you any good. If you keep them on a conscious level alone, you can be thinking of wealth and live in poverty. If you haven't internalized the thoughts of wealth, you're going to stay in poverty. Neville Goddard, the inspirational author and speaker, who usually went by just Neville, put it very well. He said, "The future must become the present in the imagination of the one who has wisely and consciously created circumstances." We've been given mental faculties that no other form of life has been given. All the other creatures in the world are completely at home in their environment. They blend in. We're totally disoriented because we've been given the mental faculties to create our own environment. Yet, you can go right through our educational system and learn nothing about these higher faculties. Memory, perception, will, reason, imagination, intuition. These are phenomenal powers, but do we understand how they work? As the late best-selling author Wayne Dyer said, "When you change the way you look at something, what you look at changes. If you change your perception, you change your world." We've got perfect memory. We've got perfect intuition. All of our higher faculties are perfect. They need developing, but we're not even taught we have them, so we're not taught how to use them. The imagination is not just something to play with. Everything we see, the world around us, was first created in the imagination and then turned into physical results. The world operates by law. Aerospace engineer Wernher von Braun put it very well when John Kennedy asked him, "What would it take to build a rocket that would carry a person to the moon and then bring him back safely to Earth?" Von Braun answered, "The will to do it." The will is one of our higher faculties. It enables us to hold one idea on the screen of our mind to the exclusion of all outside distractions. When you focus on one idea, that idea must move into form. As Andrew Carnegie observed, any idea that's held in the mind, that's emphasized, that's either feared or revered, will begin at once to clothe itself in the most convenient and appropriate form available. One of the first laws of the universe is the perpetual transmutation of energy. Energies are forever moving into form, through form, and back out of form. Energy and form. On a clear day, you can look up into the sky and see a little cloud gather. There's energy moving into form, Then the cloud will start to get dark and heavy, and boom, out comes the water. If you stood there long enough, you would see the water go right back to where it came from. Energy returns to its source of origin. That's true with us and with everything we use. We're living with laws. Most people don't understand the laws, so they're not living in harmony most of the time. As we understand the laws and bring our life into harmony with them, things start moving in the right direction. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "The law of cause and effect is the law of laws. What you put out comes back." If you give a lot of good, you're going to receive a lot of good because you're putting yourself in harmony with it. When the secret came out, it did a lot of good, but it also confused many people. They believe in the law of attraction. Think of it, and you will attract it. But most of the people that talk about the law of attraction don't really understand it. The law of attraction is a secondary law. The primary law is the law of vibration. It decrees that everything moves, nothing rests. If we live in an ocean of emotion and we think on a frequency, thought is energy. The frequency you're thinking on is going to dictate what you attract to you because it's going to control the vibration that you're in. You can't attract something that you're not in harmony with. If a person is poor, they have no money, they've never had any money, and they're thinking they're going to get rich, all they'll ever do is remain in poverty. They're in a poverty vibration. When they understand that and change it, they're in a different world and they're playing a different game. We believe that education is putting information in our heads, but that's not it at all. Maria Montessori, the famous educator, said, "We send children to school and we think they're cups. We want them to fill the cup. The truth is, the cups are already full. All the knowledge, all the power there ever was or ever will be is omnipresent. You've already got all the knowledge and the power you'll ever need. You don't get energy, you release it, and you release it to desire. When you've got a desire, you've got the energy to do it. Our spiritual DNA is perfect. There's perfection within every one of us, and that perfection seeks to express itself within and through us. Spirit is always for expansion, for expression. It always shows the essence of who we are as pure and unadulterated spirit. It always wants to express itself in a greater way. That's why we want things. Actually, we don't want to get, we want to grow. I want to run faster. I want to jump higher. Spirit wants to express itself through us. We're spiritual beings. You'll hear people say they're having a spiritual experience. They're not. They're spirits having a physical experience. The perfection within us is seeking expression all the time. That's why if we run, we want to run faster. If we jump, we want to jump higher. If we sell, we want to sell more. It doesn't matter what we do. We've got the desire to do more. We should understand why. Creative dissatisfaction. When I was a little boy, my grandmother used to tell me, "You should be satisfied with what you've got." Grandma was an angel, and we didn't want to say she was wrong, because how could Grandma be wrong? But she was. We should never be satisfied with what we've got. Dissatisfaction is a creative state, and by wanting more, you're going to do more. It's not a matter of getting it. If you think having more is going to make you better, you're kidding yourself. You're going to be miserably disappointed. It's doing more. You're going to bring home, You're going to bring more of yourself to the party. That's all I'm doing. I'm just bringing more of me to the surface. I want to do a better job today than I did yesterday. The idea of retiring seems to indicate that the objective in life is to get enough to live on so you don't have to work. but we're not made for work. Work is made for us. We get satisfaction from our work. You go to work for satisfaction. You earn money by providing service. You provide service to earn money. We've got to get some of this straightened out. We've got it wrong because people in powerful positions had it wrong, and they were teaching us, and we thought, how could they be wrong? Corporations and systems. Up to now, I've been talking about individuals, but let's apply this idea to a larger framework. Let's say a corporation. These principles are very important, but I don't think they're properly understood by people in key positions. We spend a lot of money on systems, on buildings, on things, but we don't spend that much on people. Let's take a hotel as an example. When you take the people out of the hotel, you don't have a hotel anymore. You have a building full of stuff. The hotel is people. If we want to build a business, we've got to build the people. Everybody has the potential. We've got to learn how to develop that potential. If you want a person to do a better job, you better find out what they want. Because the only time they're really going to try to do better is when they're working towards something they really want. You've got to want something in order to bring more of yourself to the party. We tell employees, listen, you've made a mistake. Let me show you how to do this right. But they go back to the way they've been doing the task because they're programmed to do it that way. That's their paradigm, and telling them something isn't going to change it. They may change for today or tomorrow, but then boom, right back to the paradigm. The paradigm is like a thermostat. It controls the temperature of the person's performance. If you want to change the temperature of their performance, you've got to change the paradigm. You have to change that thermostat, and to do that, you have to understand it. You have to start educating people so that they start to understand who they are, and what makes them tick. I've gone into companies and taught these principles. The results have been astronomical. Way back in the 70s, I went into Prudential of America and Metropolitan, two of the largest insurance companies. We raised the sales by hundreds of millions of dollars by teaching the people to form a couple of new habits. I got people to commit to being in front of a prospect by 9 a.m. and asking them to purchase $100,000 worth of insurance. We told them, you don't even have to sell it. Just ask them to buy. The only two things you have to do differently are to be in front of somebody before 9 a.m. and ask them to purchase $100,000 in insurance. They were selling more $100,000 policies in a week than they had in a year. I've gone into prison and seen the same thing happen. When you show a person why they're getting the results they're getting and what they have to do to change those results, there's a pretty good chance they're going to do it. If you're just trying to get them to change, they're not going to do it. People don't resist change. They resist being changed. If you decide to change, you'll change. If I decide that you'll change and you didn't, you're going to resist my efforts. We've got to make it appealing to people to want to do better, to change, to be more productive. To do that, we have to understand what makes them tick. We have to understand how their mind functions. Understanding how the mind functions isn't just for psychologists. It's for everybody because the mind is movement. The body is the manifestation of that movement. There was a story about Mahatma Gandhi, someone who was coming through a huge crowd of people toward him and handed him a piece of paper saying, "Would you write down some profound idea message for me to take home?" Gandhi wrote down, "I am my message." If you are the leader, you have to operate at the vibrational level at which you hope the people around you will operate. You have to be living out your aims for your organization. In the same way, if we want people in the organization to understand themselves, we've got to understand ourselves. We have to be studying with them. The thing I enjoyed most about working with Earl Nightingale was that he was forever studying. He studied all the time, and it was like Gandhi saying, "I am the message." Earl was the message. I would watch what he was doing, what he studied, On one occasion, he had a book holder on his desk with a book by the early 20th century inspirational author Thomas Troward. It was open to a certain page. What's significant about that, I asked. I've been studying that for 3 months. Same page? Yeah. When I understand it, I'll go to the next page. I started doing that. I've got all of Troward's books and I study them all the time. I started doing what Earl did. He was the message to me. I think that's what we've got to do. If we're going to lead people, we've got to do what we want them to do. There's no point in telling people to do something if you're not doing it yourself. Understand your program. The paradigm is the most important concept that anyone can study. It controls everything in our lives. Now I think I've got a pretty good understanding of this concept, but I want to understand it better, so I keep studying more. If you want to change something, you've got to use repetition. If you'd only been told your name once, you wouldn't even know what it is. They had to call you by name over and over until finally you started to respond to it. A lot of the ideas that are controlling people right now are absurd, and they were originated by someone that may have lived maybe 300 or 400 years ago, but they've been passed along in the DNA since then, and they've become a part of your DNA. This kept expanding for about 280 days after conception until you made your debut on the planet. Your mind was wide open. Everything that was going on around you went right into your subconscious mind. Most people are starting out behind the 8 ball. That's okay, because you can change that. I was 26 when I started to change, and I've done fairly well. I've helped a few million people change, but I've still got a lot to learn. I have been at it for a long time. I've gone into prisons, I've gone into schools, I've gone into corporations. The human being is a fascinating expression of life. We've got awesome powers locked up within us. If we're going to change, we've got to understand what's involved. If you're going to drive the car, you have to understand what the gear shift is for. You have to understand something about your computer if you're going to work with it. There are programs on your computer, and we rely on them. If we want to program change, we have it done by somebody that writes codes. Your paradigm is a program, and it's in your biocomputer. The people who wrote the code for the program controlling your life knew nothing about the mind. They were passing along what they had received. Nevertheless, they installed this program through repetition. We were taught the same things over and over. How to use a spoon, how to walk, how to get one foot in front of the other. It was repetition. Patient, constant, spaced repetition. Attitude. The magic word. Attitude is everything. How well anybody will do with this material will depend on their attitude, which is the composite of their thoughts, feelings, and actions. They're joined together like the colors of a rainbow. I've listened to a record of Earl Nightingale's, which is a magnificent essay on attitude called The Magic Word, over and over, perhaps 10,000 times. The magic word is attitude. By repeatedly listening to this record, I became aware of what attitude is. Then I became aware of my own attitude. I became aware that I had a bad attitude about who I was and what I was capable of doing. I had to become aware first of what attitude actually is. And then I had to become aware of how to change it. I changed it the way it was built. Somebody else had built it through repetition. Because what Earl had to say about attitude went against everything I had been taught up to that point. I would listen to the same record over and over again. I have a copy of Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, bound in black leather. I've been reading this particular copy every day since 1963. I started reading this book when I was 26. My sister Helen, 2 years older than me, had a friend named Pat, and Pat was a reader. She always had books. She always had a book with her. I think Pat read everything in the local library. Think and Grow Rich was the first book I ever read. When I was first given this book, I said, I can't read. That wasn't true. I could not read well, but I could read, about as well as most people, at a 7th grade level. When I started to read this book, my sister said to Pat, Bob started to read. When I saw Pat, she asked Helen. Helen said, You're reading? Yes. What are you reading? It's a good book. You'll enjoy it. Think and Grow Rich, she smiled. A few months later, I saw Pat again. She asked, Hey, Bob, are you still reading? Yeah, I said. What are you reading? Think and Grow Rich. Gee, you were into that last time I saw you. Yeah, I said, I'm still reading it. She looked at me kind of strangely. A few months later, Pat asked me, Are you still reading? Yeah. What are you reading? Think and Grow Rich. I read that one book for a long time. I was doing what's required to change a paradigm. I didn't know that. I wasn't doing it deliberately. I was just fascinated with what I was reading. Pat thought that was strange behavior. She'd read a book and then go on to another one. Pat was well educated because she read so many books, but she didn't even know herself. She was a maintenance person, and she and her husband had nothing. They never got anywhere. They never accomplished anything in their lives. They just got by. God's highest form of creation, and they just got by. As I often say in my seminars, when you read a good book through the second time, you don't see something in that book that wasn't there before. You see something in yourself that wasn't there before. The repetition creates the awareness. I'll give you another example of the necessity of repetition. When I was a kid, I had a friend named Jack Gregory. While we were hanging around his house, I would say, Are yous coming? Jack's mother would say, Bob, it's not yous, it's you. I thought that she didn't know that because there were more than one of them. It has to be yous. I tried to keep saying yous, and she kept correcting me. Then I would hear somebody say, Are you coming? When they were talking about more than one person. I would hear somebody else say, Are you coming? In the same kind of context. I would try to correct myself. I'd start to say, Are yous coming? And I would stop myself and say, Are you coming? I felt very uncomfortable saying this, but eventually I changed my habit of speaking. Now whenever I hear anybody say use, I immediately think of Miss Gregory. Miss Gregory used repetition to create an awareness in my mind. I don't think she knew she was doing that. I certainly didn't, but that's what she did. That's what we have to do. We have to create awareness that what we're doing, our habitual behavior, is not producing the results we want. We have to become aware of how to change our behavior, and we have to change it the same way we have built it, through repetition. Read the same book, listen to the same recording. If you listen to Earl's recording, The Magic Word, for a couple times a day for 6 months, I guarantee that you'll be acutely aware of your attitude. And although it sounds simple, it will change your life. I still have my old record player and the little 7-inch records that Earl recorded way back in the early 60s. I still listen to them over and over again because I know that I can have a better attitude than I have.